مرحبا. In this video, I want to talk about long vowels and the passive voice. المبني للمجهول وحروف العلة, and how they work when it comes to weak verbs in Arabic, that is verbs whose judr contains a vowel, and also verbs that have a hamza that sits on a kursi, a chair, that is a vowel. In this video, I'm assuming that you're familiar with both basic verb conjugations and how to make verbs passive in Arabic, and I'll be focusing on some of the important differences that may arise when we're working with those verb patterns. I do want to mention that in this video I'm not going to delve into every single exception with every single conjugation of every possible verb that might arise. That would be a long and tedious video and you might not want to watch it. But what I do want to do is give you some basic guiding principles that can help you predict how the vowels in these verbs will change in the passive voice. Basically, the main rule is that the long vowel in a verb in the passive voice is going to change to reflect the voweling placed upon it by the passive construction. If there isn't a vowel on a certain letter of the judr, then sometimes the preceding vowel will dictate what form it'll take. So, one basic example. If we remember form 3 and the basic form 3 pattern in Arabic, we've got fa'ala. There's our template. Every form 3 verb in the past tense is sort of going to be built off of that map. So we have the verb shahada, which can mean to see, to view. Past tense, fatha, 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 just like our template. Fine, we're good. Now, in the passive voice, we know that the vowels in the past tense are going to be dhamma and kasra on the first 2 syllables instead of fatha and fatha. What that means is for this vowel, and shahada is not a weak verb, by the way, it's a regular verb, but this just illustrates what's going to happen. We're going to need to take this dhamma, and if it comes right before a long vowel that doesn't have a separate marker on it, that dhamma is going to dictate the shape that that vowel will take. So in form 3, in the passive voice, actually every single verb is going to follow the pattern fu'ila. So the strength of that dhamma has bent this alif in the active voice pattern into its own shape to make its own sound. It's kind of imposed its will on that vowel. So if we wanted to say he was seen or it was seen, conjugated for the masculine, we would actually say shuhida instead of shahada. It looks a little silly the first time you see it, but that is really what we do. And if we were talking about something grammatically feminine and saying hiya, she or it was seen, we would just add our regular suffix ending. Shuhidat. She was seen. Note that in the present tense passive, we're going to retain that alif again because of the vowel pattern that's imposed. The difference between active and passive is actually this fatha here. Yufa'il would be the active pattern, and yufa'al with a fatha is the passive pattern. So if we were saying he is seen, we would have an alif once again. Oh. Yushahad, because we have that fatha and it's dictating its will to this vowel. So when it comes to weak verbs, again, verbs that have a waw or a ya as part of their judr, we can also often use this principle to determine what's going to happen. It can seem random if we're reading a text that has passive verbs and letters are shifting, but it is predictable. There are patterns that are there. So take, for example, the verb da'a, which means to call. Da'a is what we call a fa'al naqis. Its last letter is the last letter of the judr, I should say, is a vowel. And if we want to put it in the passive, because of the passive stem and the vowels that are an integral part of making a verb passive, we can predict what that vowel is going to look like. So, in a Form 1 passive verb, we're going to need these vowels. I suppose the fatha is optional depending on the conjugation, but we're going to have a dhamma here and then a kasra. And the kasra is going to similarly make its will known on that vowel. The actual judr is del, ain, waw, and in a normal active present tense conjugation we would see that waw. But in a case like this, where we want to say he was called, because of that kasra making the I sound that corresponds to the long I sound of a ya, it's going to become a ya. So he was called would be du'iyya, fully vocalized in Fusha. Or she was called, we would just add our conjugation on the end, du'iyyat. Or I was called, du'itu. This will work for all the derived forms as well, in the case of af'al naqisa. And in the present tense, again, because of the passive vowel pattern, yuf'al, that fatha is going to change this vowel into an alif maksura, actually. So he is called would be yud'al, etc. So for a hollow verb like qala or zara, once again we look at this past tense passive pattern and we notice that we have a kasra right where that middle radical, that middle letter is. So the kasra is going to affect it similarly. Qala, he said, but if we wanted to say it was said in the past, it would be qila. Or zara would become zira. Again, because of that kasra, that's part of our passive pattern. Similarly, in the present tense, yuf'al, we have a fatha, which is going to make it look like this. We retain that dhamma, that's part of the passive pattern, and we have yuqal, it is said, present tense, or yuzar, he or it is visited, passive voice. We can also use this same idea to determine, the vowel that's going to serve as the kursi, the chair of a hamza. You've probably noticed that lots of verbs have hamza sitting on a vowel, either an alif or a waw, or sometimes a ya with no dots. So if we took a verb like qara'a, to read, once again we apply the same principles. So in the past tense we have quri'a, and because of that kasra, the alif, that is the kursi, the chair, again, that's just what we call it, that the hamza is sitting on, is going to turn into a ya. So instead of saying qara'tu al-kitab, I read the book, for example, we could say the book was read, and it would look like that. Or if we were talking about an article instead, a maqala, which is feminine with ta marbuta, we could say or write quri'at al-maqala. So once we internalize this system a little bit, it can help take the guesswork out of what to do with the vowels in our verbs. And it can also make pronunciation a little bit easier if we're reading a text aloud for any reason. One more time, this is a very general set of rules, and there are going to be exceptions just because of the way that Arabic grammar works, and sometimes we're going to need to avoid multiple sukoons in a string on formal Arabic words. But once you get this basic idea down, it will help you a lot in terms of making any verbs with vowels passive. and writing them correctly when the need arises.